Yeah, he shot the pastor. He shot all the men in the church. Please come right away. But there's so many people dead, I think. Oh, my God.
My parents were very anti-Jewish. I heard all the bad words, kike, swaps, dagos. I heard all that as a kid in New York City.
You were a Jew, you were no good, and you were responsible for the wars in the world. You were scapegoated.
Islam is evil! Christ is king!
People are always going to be against somebody they deem to be a threat, especially if they're recognizable, like we were back in the 40s.
I lived through the Holocaust, and it shouldn't happen again.
Finding how to obtain peace without going out and killing somebody else.
We never learn.
When you see something wrong, it is your obligation to speak up about it and not let it go by.
Every generation has to learn anew, speaking out.
Hello, I am Daniel Adibi, and I'll be your host for Our World 101, hosted by Mainline TV Network, where kids can tune in to discuss real-world issues and to have discussions to bridge people together despite our differences. Today, we'll be talking about concentration and internment camps. Concentration camps have taken massive groups of people, put them under harsh conditions, and deprived them of their basic human rights. Joining us today to talk about World War II concentration camps is documentary filmmaker David Goodman, who has dedicated his life to creating films about social justice. The trailer you have just seen is from his latest film, Elder Voices. Mr. Goodman, welcome to the show. Thank you for being our guest.
You're welcome.
So tell us a little bit about your film.
Well, the film is about my concern, is about the present conditions politically and economically in the United States. I use as a reference, as you pointed out, World War II and Nazi Germany, and specifically, and also the Japanese American internmentship during the war in the USA. But the film is it's a warning, it's a signal that people cannot be complacent, that we are not necessarily exempt from going down that horrible path ourselves. And this is to help people understand how it happened then and the consequences, but the film is about today.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I watched Elder Voices myself, and I thought it was really inspiring. I think every person my age should watch it. It opens our eyes to the past, and that's the ideal way to prevent history from repeating itself, like you said. So what inspired you? I mean, I think that film was amazing. What inspired you?
Thank you. Can you say amazing again? I appreciate that. I like the film myself. And sometimes I don't like my films when they're done, but this one I do like. What inspired me was what I've already alluded to, that I'm 74 years old, and I've been involved in and concerned about the United States as it is politically, economically, culturally for many, many years now. And I just feel that recently, in the last few years, things have taken a turn very much for the worse. And that's what inspired me to make this film. And I thought having people who had lived through challenges and experiences and inspirationally overcame them, by the way, would be a very good vehicle for expressing how I feel personally.
I think that's really inspiring. So, in your own words, can you explain what concentration and internment camps are?
Yes, I'm not using my own words. I'm using a cheat sheet. But here's the definition of concentration camp. It's a place where large numbers of people, especially political prisoners or members of persecuted minorities, are deliberately imprisoned in a relatively small area with inadequate facilities, sometimes to provide forced labor or to await mass execution. The term is most strongly associated with the several hundred camps established by the Nazis in Germany and occupied Europe between 1933 and 1945, the most infamous one being Dachau, which is actually referenced in the film. Oh, and then I can go on and say, internment camps, as it applies to here in this country, is the internment of Japanese Americans in the United States during World War II, was the forced relocation and incarceration in concentration camps in the western interior of the country of about 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, most of whom lived on the Pacific coast. And I might add, what's stunning is that 62% of those who were incarcerated, Japanese Americans, are and were U.S. citizens.
So it sounds like these camps, by the way you're describing them, were really horrible. How could humanity allow the existence of these camps?
That's an excellent question, Daniel, and it's something beyond my ability to answer, because I only know that historically, since recorded history has begun with human beings, that there's always been fears and persecution of others and wars since the beginning of time, of human time. So this is nothing new, but we're just at a critical junction at this moment. All I can do is shout out and hoping that a lot of people will respond.
Okay, so how long have they been around for?
Pardon?
How long have the camps been around for?
Well, it depends which camps you're talking about. I mean, there have been camps where people have been imprisoned for centuries and centuries and centuries, going back thousands of years. But the terms that are used in the film and that I just quoted, they're relatively new, but they're referring to specifically 20th century.
Okay, so based on what happened in the past, are there any specific camps you'd like to mention that exist today that are similar to the ones in the past?
I think that's a good question. In the United States, which is the only place I can really speak to, or that's relevant for our purposes, is I would consider all the immigrants from Central America and Mexico who are incarcerated along the border in Texas and some in Florida, and actually even in Pennsylvania. Did you know there were people in Pennsylvania who were incarcerated, who were immigrants from Latin America? There are. They fit the definition of being a concentration camp in the sense that the definition I use applies to them. And the other thing I would add is that it also, the most horrible aspect, our families are separated, and children much your age and people of your age, but even very young children, 3, 4, can be and are separated from their parents and don't know where the parents are. The parents don't know where they are. And that is, I think it's a shame. I think it's a very shameful mark on that that's where we stand as a country. That's our policy. And by the way, that's been carried out before Trump. That's been in place for many, many years. It's just been escalated now.
Okay, so, I mean, obviously these camps are repeating themselves, and it's pretty bad. So how do we prevent them in the future? What can we do to stop these camps from repeating themselves?
Well, first we have to stop the present before we worry about the future, because of all the people I just mentioned. And I work on that, and many, many people work on it, and many religious groups work on it, and many community organizations, and many groups that are for immigrant rights in this country work on it. A lot of documentary films are made about it. This is just one of many, many that touch on this. I think first we have to solve the problem that we have. Going forward, Daniel, to be honest with you, with the pandemic and the uncertain political times we live in, it's unclear what form in the future. I'm not trying to dodge your question, but it's not clear to me or anyone really what will need to be done moving forward beyond this. Right now, let's try to hold the line where it is, and then we'll worry about what happens next. And people will respond now and in the future. I'm sure of that.
Okay. So you mentioned that we have to stop the president. And what other presidents, have there been any other presidents other than Trump and Roosevelt who have created internment camps in America?
Let me first reference for people that listen or watching us is that President Roosevelt during World War II is the one who signed an executive order that actually rounded up those over 100,000 people I mentioned. So it's it's unfortunate that it's not just the president, it's not just Trump, that this has been, both parties have been guilty of this over many, many years. And I will add, this isn't in the film, but actually very important, is the reservations, in a sense, are country for Native Americans who Europeans took away their land. They're in a loosely defined way, but they're in concentration camps too today. Oklahoma, many places that were Native American lands have been despoiled by uranium mining, nuclear wasteland, all kinds of things. So that needs to be mentioned in this discussion.
Yeah, so how can somebody who's listening to this, what can they do to contribute to preventing these camps from developing?
I think they have to watch this program to begin with. And then after they watch your program, and congratulations on doing it, I think it's wonderful. We need a lot of it. It's inspirational to me that you are doing this. So it's reciprocated. It goes both ways. But I think after that, there's tons and tons of resources that are available. And you can go online. You can do something as simple as Google and come up on any of these subjects with a lot of information. Those of you who watch TV and radio, I don't watch TV. I don't listen to radio. I do everything from within my own bubble here where I live. So but people who do, stay current, but make sure that the sources and the television and wherever you're getting your information is grounded. In other words, there's a lot of fake news today in the world. I assume you know what fake news is. And you have to be very careful that the sources that you use, anyone who's trying to dig up more information, that those sources are credible sources. That takes vigilance and some understanding of who's speaking and why they're saying what they're saying.
So you're saying that one of the greatest ways we can help is through educating ourselves about the topic, and then in that way we can prevent any history from repeating itself.
Well, you said it better than I did, but I think not only that, you have to, one has to, after first educate, then agitate, meaning let it be known, as it said in the film, when the women kid at the end of the film, you have to then act on things. The lesson of the film is if you don't act, being educated means nothing. You know, if I know something is really wrong, but I do, and I think it's horrible, but I don't do something individually and join with others who share those concerns, then nothing is going to materialize that can bring about a better world.
Okay, so I remember when we talked briefly before the interview, I asked you if you could explain what living in a concentration camp would be like, and you said that nobody can explain it unless they have experienced it firsthand.
Yes.
I think that's a really important message, and I just wanted to repeat it.
I think, though, we do the best we can. That's why the people I have, some of them were in concentration camps, or at least for a while, is because they're the ones, the survivors of these kinds of situations that we've been talking about. They're the people to listen to, first and foremost. I only feel myself as a documentary filmmaker that I'm a transmission belt, if you will. My thing is just to provide those people a voice to be heard, but they're the ones who are impacted. They're the ones who can articulate those experiences in a way that you and I cannot.
Yeah, and I also remember you said that instead of doing the talk, instead of asking what we can do to help and doing the talking for other people, we should listen to other people's stories. And I think that applies to today with the Black Lives Matter protests, when people are trying to do the talking for the people who have faced racism for a long time. But really, we should be listening to their stories and how they went through it. And yeah, I just wanted to repeat those messages on the program because I thought they were really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that we actually start the film with Charleston, South Carolina, where a racist, self-acknowledged racist, killed several people, I forget how many, in a church, who were just worshipers in the church. And it's important that people ought to feel it might be them in that case, or it might be the people who were interned, Japanese Americans, or it might have been Jews or other political dissenters in World War II. But, you know, you could be next. I could be next. You never know. So it's also in your own self-interest, because you don't want to hear that knock on the door. And you don't know where it might be coming from and what the agenda is, why by the government or just people who are acting out, like there's a lot of acting out going on, a lot of violence. You just don't know what might be coming next. So I see it actually as a form of self-protection to do this as well. Self-protection for myself.
Yeah, I think we've been having a great discussion, And I know we kind of mentioned this before, and it's really important to have this. So, like you said, through education and acting, so that we don't allow history to repeat itself. But kind of going back to that topic, we've seen the destruction of concentration camps. We've seen how awful history could be. But we've still seen a sharp increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Even after we've seen the destruction of the past, when we should have learned a long time ago, why do you think we still don't understand?
Well, people want to believe what they want to believe. And in terms of Jewish people, who all either came from Northern Africa or Europeans for the most part, have always been scapegoated historically. And that's a long discussion in and of itself that I can't say too much about, although I'm half Jewish. But I don't, that's a long story about that. In terms of Black Lives Matter, I think the problem is some people just don't want to listen. I think the people in Black Lives Matter, and I follow that very closely, that the people just don't want to hear that. There's maybe two reasons for that, primary reasons. One is, unfortunately, there's a large percentage of people in this country, I have to tell it as it is, who are racist, outright racist, and proud of being racist or bigoted or anti-Semitic. And then there's also a lot of people who just don't want to hear because it's too painful. They don't want to hear about, my life is hard enough. I'm just trying to make get through the next paycheck. Where's my next paycheck coming from? How am I going to feed my kids? I'm not saying this unsympathetically either. I can't deal with, there's so much horrible things. I don't want to hear more horrible things. I might be sympathetic to the messages of someone like Black Lives Matter, but I don't want to take it in because I already feel too depressed, awful, overwhelmed, unempowered.
Yeah, do you also feel like people don't want to listen because they want to feel superior? Do you think that's another reason? Possibly?
Well, you're giving me leading questions, but they're good leading questions. Yes, I think that absolutely. A lot of people always want to feel better than someone else. And it tends to be that the less secure one is in one's own personal life, like the people I just mentioned, people who are marginalized, a lot of times through no fault of their own. For instance, take Detroit, take the auto workers who had great contracts and great jobs and could send their kids to college. Well, that's no longer the case. And they feel now more threatened by everyone else because they've lost their security. And when you lose your own security, you want to feel one up to somebody. You have to feel like you're not at the bottom of the heap. Psychologically, that's important.
So we're approaching the end of our discussion. Are there any final words you'd like to add?
No, I just think that it's important to follow through in terms, if you want to get on the bandwagon, please join us. And I think that we will know a lot more in a couple months where things stand. I'm hoping there is an election, by the way. There may not even be an election, or it could be contested. Very likely it'll be contested by one party or both parties. And then there'll be a constitutional crisis. And who knows where it'll go from there. So the next few weeks are key in terms of how we can plot moving forward. And I don't have any answers for that, but it's paramount to what's going to happen in the coming couple of years. Daniel, you're great. It's a great interview.
Thanks. Well, thank you for being our guest, and thank you for shedding light on such important topics. So I'll be back on our next episode where we'll be discussing the refugee crisis in America. Thank you, Mr. Goodman, again. I'm Daniel Adibi, and thank you for watching Our World 101.